I focus on hiring curious, adaptable people who are open to embracing the unknown, right? When you're scaling in a new market, you kind of don't know what you don't know, right? And you have to be sure that you have a team around you that is okay with that environment. I do believe that you can teach product knowledge, but you can't teach curiosity.
Welcome to Scale Sessions, the podcast that helps revenue leaders like you boost sales and revenue to achieve business growth within the trenches insights.
We can skip the fluff and focus on real-world strategies you can use right away.
Each episode brings you actionable takeaways from sales and revenue leaders navigating growth challenges like you. Let's dive into today's session and scale up your success. Lisa Rauch is the Director of Sales EMEA at FareHarbor, with over 20 years of experience in the travel and hospitality industry. Known for her success in opening new markets, scaling teams, and leading with curiosity, Lisa has worked across APAC, the US, and Europe. Her leadership has driven impressive growth and lasting change in competitive environments. Before joining FareHarbor, she held Director and Associate Director roles at Oakwood Worldwide and Agoda, before taking a year out of work to raise her daughter. Lisa, welcome, and all the way from Amsterdam, but originally from California. How long have you been in Amsterdam for?
I've been in Amsterdam for just over 6 years. It's unbelievable. It's gone by so fast.
Yeah, we're going to get into your career in a moment, but you've worked all over the world, right? You've lived in like loads of countries.
Yeah. I've lived, I obviously worked and lived in my home country of the US, but on really both coasts. And then I was in Singapore for 4 years, really amazing adventure there. Came back to Los Angeles and then moved here to the Netherlands in 2018. So it's been a fun journey. Yeah.
So no surprise that you work in travel and hospitality.
Yes.
Given that you've lived in so many different countries. And that must have been quite the roller coaster over the last 6 years. And you originally did a degree in comms and PR. So tell us about your journey to where you are now.
Yeah, so I really grew up in the tourism industry. My father worked for a rental car company. My mother worked for hotels, including Hilton. So I guess it's kind of in my DNA, the industry itself. But when I was in my late high school years, I was working for Marriott, and I was driving the boat in a big resort in the Palm Springs area. And but I worked in the events department there. And the director really kind of took me under her wing and said, "Hey, you're going off to university. What are you going to study?" I had no idea. I was like 17 years old at that point. And she talked to me about public relations, and that said that I kind of had a knack for communication. So I decided to study that. But as it happens, I landed back in the tourism sector in a kind of a niche space in the hospitality, doing corporate housing and service departments. And I really started at the ground level in that company, kind of guest services, taking phone calls. And I do say I grew up in that company. I was with them for 12 and a half years. I did the guest service role, inside sales management, outside sales management. And that's when they were looking to expand their footprint in the Asia Pacific region and their offering in that market. So I was tapped to go over and lead that sales effort. So I did 4 years that, and then it was really time for me to go home. And I relocated back to Los Angeles, where I was recruited by Agoda. And then I wanted to relocate to the Netherlands for love. I had met a Dutch man and was doing the long distance relationship. And so I said, "Hey, I'd like to move to the Netherlands." And they said, "Hey, we want to actually expand our presence in Europe. Would you be interested in opening an office for us there in Amsterdam?" And so I did that. So, and then after the pandemic and things started to open back up, they really needed to take a decision over how to, kind of go forward, and they wanted to cut costs. And so the Amsterdam office was closing down. And it was a great opportunity for me because at that point I knew I was pregnant. I was going to have my little one. And so I took a year off, but I was really anxious to get back to work. And I saw the role at FareHarbor, and that's where I am today.
So the classic question people always ask is like, how do you fall into sales? But I like to spin it a different way. Like, why did you stay in sales? What was that,
Yeah. I really consider myself like a student of the craft. I get so much energy from the kind of sociological, psychological, like the way that people take decisions. I find it super interesting. And also the different kind of trends that have occurred over the 20 years that I've been in the industry, and how data helps us take decisions over sales strategies now, and how we can work with how we kind of map the buying decision process on the client side. And so for me, it's just, it has provided constant challenge, which has been exciting. And for me, as I've always kind of said, as long as I'm being challenged, I'm up for the ride. So, and sales for me is just kind of always provided that. Yeah.
And I do think early roles in hospitality, being on the front line, dealing with difficult customers, I think that is the greatest training for sales. Do you find you still use some of those skills that you learned early on?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I talk to my team about this pretty often, and we'll joke that, it's everybody should be required to do a 1-year role in a service industry.
100%. I say this too, yeah.
Yeah. You learn so much. And one of the things that I actually learned, and this is like before I started my career, but when I was in university, I was a server in a restaurant. I was waiting tables to supplement my income. And somebody said to me at one point, just anticipate the customer's needs. And that is just something that I've carried on even through my sales career. Like, just try to anticipate in that kind of environment, it was like, anticipate if they'll need ketchup or mustard and put it on the table in advance. But like, now I kind of translate that into, what does a client not even realize that they need, right? And how can I anticipate that in our sales process?
Some of the best salespeople I've ever worked with have done B2C, or like B to consumer, like first, and then done B2B. You just learn how to deal with people. And then some people who come out of university and just go straight into a more prescriptive B2B environment, or work in a big corporate and then go into it, I find they struggle. They struggle with that other level of empathy or understanding or thinking differently. I think it's really important.
Just going back to the sales environment, around 1 in 5 sales leadership roles are filled by women. How have you found working in a predominantly male-dominated space?
Yeah, I hope this is really taken the right way, but I have had the opportunity very early in my career to work for incredibly inspirational and driven female sales leaders. And so I kind of, at a quite a young age in my career, just saw that as completely normal. I didn't really take it as, I didn't see it as something unusual, right? And so I think for me, I haven't thought a lot about it through my career, but I'm very aware of it kind of now at this point in my career. And so I really think about how I can like pay it forward and mentor women so that the presence of women, so we see that number really increase over time. And I want to do kind of my small part to influence that. There's certainly been moments in my career where I've kind of felt that I needed to prepare twice as hard or speak twice as loud or something like, things like that. But at the end of the day, I've also recognized that, I have a point of view, and by, coming to the table with that point of view, I have been able to, kind of gain respect in the rooms. Yeah.
Do you coach any of that, or like do you try and pass that on to any other people, female, that's in your team? Like,
I do, yeah. So we have at FareHarbor, we have a women in leadership mentoring program, and so it's really exciting because that was actually employee like employee created, it's employee ran. And so kind of being able to be a part of that, and matched up with different women, ambitious women in the organizations who are looking to grow their careers. And that's been really exciting. And then, I've been able to maintain some of my mentorship relationships, kind of beyond the corporate environment. And I get a lot of energy from those interactions. Yeah.
I love hearing that you had some amazing female managers, because you don't always hear that.
Yeah.
What were some of the skills and the lessons that you learned from them?
I think one of the things I really learned is how to get the most out of people. And that there's one sales leader I'm particularly thinking of, and I would walk out of meetings with her kind of frustrated, because I would be like, she didn't tell me what I needed to do. She gave me kind of this, what would you do answer? And but now I obviously learned that she was coaching me. She was enabling me,
Yeah, I was laughing because it's that hard thing where you just want to tell someone, you're being coached, but you didn't realize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I had that opportunity very early on from one sales leader in particular I can think of. And I went into the next stages of my career. Her name was Susan. And I would think to myself, when I was kind of faced with challenging situations, I would say, what would Susan do? And that became, a little bit of, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it became a bit of a mantra for me. And, but yeah, just, it was those subtle coaching moments that I learned early on in my career that I've tried to carry
You've probably got more junior salespeople now going, what would Lisa do? So you're the new
I
Susan.
hope so.
Yeah, I think there's at least 3 or 4 of them.
Oh, thank you, Nicola.
So you had your daughter recently, and you took a year out. Now, for me, women and men, it's a real preference on when you come back. Some people like to come back quicker because it's better for them mentally, for whatever reason. Some like to take longer. You took a year out, which I think is a great thing to do as well. How did you then adapt coming back? Because 12 months out of a business is a long time. A lot happens in a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And one, I would say I'm incredibly grateful that I was able to take that time out. I understand that not everybody has that opportunity. And so I'm very grateful that I could. I think for me, in my own experience, it helped that I was between companies in that year that I took off, right? So when I joined FareHarbor, I was really starting a whole new role, and could kind of take advantage of that in terms of, hey, I kind of don't know what I don't know. You can ask those questions. You can say like, okay, I pulled a new card. Hey, how does it work over here? Type thing. But, and a year for me was kind of just long enough because I missed sales. I really missed interacting with a team. I missed, kind of having objectives and goals and working towards those things.
I have empathy for it on another level because I've got 3 kids, and I know it is different for men than it is for women. I just think generally, and not saying that you don't, just general behaviors can be different, not all the time, but then that pull I know my wife has, where you want to have a career and you want to push, but at the same time you feel guilty both ways. So you constantly feel a bit guilty. Maybe you don't feel this, but I know she has, is like, oh, am I doing enough at work? Am I spending enough time at home? You constantly feel this pull, and that you're never doing both enough. Did you feel that, or is that the same?
I do feel that at times. I think one of the things that has helped me a lot, and it is being with an organization that values that work-life balance. I'm incredibly proud to be part of the Booking Holdings group, where, we have time available to take paternity leave or care leave or things like this that we need. But at the same time, yes, it is, I try to really protect the hours in the day that I want with my daughter. And so like in the evenings, when I get home, I don't even take my phone out until after she's gone to bed. So I really have those 2 hours that I know are just with her. And then I can, if I need to pick work back up for another hour or something in the evening, I can. But yeah, it is I think that experience, it translates to, but I also see it with my partner. He can sometimes struggle as well, like feeling like he's not having enough time with our daughter. And so I think it crosses over, but for me, it's, I have to really take time to prioritize, and I try to make it a known thing with my team. Like, my daughter is here and she's part of my life, and she's a priority just as all of you are. And so I just try and be kind of real with, this is life.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, talking about like almost communicating, but setting boundaries, but then making sure that you're human with it, that people understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it helped that you were starting a new job so you could start with new ways of working versus going back to the previous one and adapting?
Yeah, for me, I really do think so, Nicola. I think I could kind of, with any new role or any new company, or, you have a chance to reinvent yourself. And even in an existing role, I think that's such a really cool thing. But yeah, I was really able to now kind of look at my situation and say, okay, how do I want to do things differently? I can honestly say, in the role that I was in prior to that, I was waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to prepare reports and time for an 8 o'clock all hand. I mean, it was wild, especially coming out of COVID, and the tourism industry was just, really had so much ground to make up. So we were just flat out. But when I was joining the new company, I was able to say, okay, here's my new reality. How do I want to take this forward? What boundaries do I want to set from the very beginning? And how can I maintain those going forward? Yeah.
So I wanted to move on to talk about expansion. So you've opened new markets in APAC, US and Europe, and you've not only opened them, but you've also done it successfully, because I think lots of people can say I've opened them, but they may not still be there. And often this is completely from scratch. What do you focus on when you first go into a new market?
It might be a little bit cliche, but it's so important, but it really is understanding the local market. For me, it means diving deep into customer behavior, the cultural nuances, the competitive landscape. I really have to, really prioritize building relationships with local stakeholders. That takes time, right? You need to really understand the landscape and identifying who has influence in the market, what might be who might be a kind of an anchor client that you can sign on, that can help, you can use as an example and case studies and build upon to, grow your market share in a specific geography. And in my current role, listening to call and demo recordings has really sped this up for me, right? It's kind of like speed dating in a new market. Because while getting on the ground, there's nothing really that beats the face-to-face interactions. The call recordings, listening to the client interactions with my team has really helped me to grasp nuances faster than I was able ever to do before. Yeah.
So it sounds like you got a really good understanding of, the playbook. What's the toughest thing about it, though? If someone's listening today and they're like, I've got to go and move to a different region. I've done it when I went from the UK to the US and set an office up in New York. It's really tough. Like, what was the trickiest thing you had to deal with?
Yeah, I think the trickiest thing is, you might have a playbook. I mean, you should have a playbook, right? And you can make the mistake of assuming that it's a cut and paste situation, but you really have to test it, test that at a local level and understand, like, is the pricing it might not be you can cut and paste the pricing into the new market. The value proposition might be different, or might resonate differently with the local clients. So I think for me, the biggest thing that that I've learned over time is there's going to be elements of the playbook that you can kind of reframe and put into play, and there's going to be elements that you just have to be like, okay, that's not going to work. Let's go back to the drawing board and think about how we're going to do it differently.
What have been some of the biggest surprises when you've gone, I was sure the playbook was going to work and I'm actually going to have to rip up this part?
A really good example, I think, is when I was in Asia. I was in service departments and corporate housing, right? And so we had the kind of quality and expectations over the accommodations in each of the different countries varied wildly, right? But we were working with, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies in their relocations. And so really trying to, set expectations with the clients in such a way that they understood what they were getting into in the local markets. That wasn't something I had really thought about or wasn't kind of part of my playbook previously, right? So, that was something I kind of learned through experience, but we really had to embed that into our client interactions. And it was a bit of an education. It was really a client education, that kind of became a line item in the playbook over, okay, they're expanding into India. They need to understand this is what the accommodations, the hotels, the service departments, et cetera, look like in that market. And it looks very different from Singapore. So,
very different.
So, yeah, exactly. So, so that was an interesting experience for me.
I just found when I used to work in across Europe, the cultural nuances. Like I remember going to a meeting in Denmark, and thank goodness my country manager was like, don't talk about anything apart from how your journey was, how your family are for the first 10 minutes, no selling. So, okay. And then I went to a meeting in Amsterdam with A.S. Watson, and I walked to them out, so what do you want? And I was like, oh, okay, straight into it. And in literally the next day, and it was just such a change. And thank goodness I had people on the ground who could warn me, because I wouldn't have had a clue how to navigate that otherwise.
Yeah. I think that is such a good point. And having that, a team with some local expertise and that's able to really kind of give you the heads up and say to you, but you also have to solicit it and you have to be open to it, because if you're going into it a little bit like, okay, I'm head honcho here, I know what's up, like you will fumble. And so, really kind of going to your team and be like, okay, what do I not know? Like, help me understand how things work here. But then also being okay that you're going to make some mistakes. But yeah, I had the same experience in the Nordics as well. And like the hard sales tactics do not work there. We've had to really kind of adjust our strategy to accommodate that market. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to go with the tea for at least 10, 15 minutes, like compulsory.
Yes,
when you're
exactly.
entering these new markets, how do you measure success and determine whether it's a market you want to invest more into?
Yeah, so I think there's 3 things that I'm really looking for as early indicators. One is pipeline growth, right? Are we seeing that if the pipeline isn't growing, it's really a sign we're not resonating with the market. It might be that pricing's off, our value proposition's off. We need to really be critical with ourselves over what's resonating, but we should see growth in our pipeline relatively quickly, and that deal velocity that sits behind that. Our conversion rates, so really kind of from cold call to demo to live. And then the third piece is the customer feedback. I'll pay attention to early client retention rates. If they're staying and they're expanding, it's really a signal, right, that we're on the right track. So those 3 things for me, pipeline growth, conversion rates, and customer feedback are kind of the trinity.
And have you pulled out of any markets because it just hasn't felt right?
We were looking to really looking to expand our presence in China. And China is it's really, really complicated. And we just weren't ready. Like, we didn't understand the legalities, the financial, just how the financial systems worked there. And so, while I was over, we kind of, I would say we dipped our toe in the water and very quickly got burned and pulled our toe back out. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally get that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You've built really high performing sales teams in some of the most competitive markets. What strategies do you prioritize when scaling a team in a new location?
I focus on hiring curious, adaptable people who are open to embracing the unknown, right? When you're scaling in a new market, you kind of don't know what you don't know, right? And you have to be sure that you have a team around you that is okay with that environment. So curious, adaptable people is really, really important. I do believe that you can teach product knowledge, but you can't teach curiosity, right? So that's why I find that really, really important. Clear communications of expectations and regular check-ins are also essential to keep the team focused and aligned on the goals, right? And I actually believe that this starts in the recruiting process, right? The last stage that I have with the last round in the interview process or recruiting process I have is actually just an expectations setting discussion where I'm super clear with them over how we set targets, how we handle performance management, and also what our mission is as a group, and really kind of being clear over what the expectations are of them as they come into the role. Because I think the fastest way you can fail is by bringing people into the organization who have a completely different set of expectations than what the job actually is.
Yeah, I get that. One of our company values is be curious. So, like, how do you identify that in the hiring process? You talked about it in the last stage. So, it's a hard thing to recruit for.
It is a hard thing to recruit for. I think so. The role I'm in now has been really fun for this because we didn't do any hiring in the first year that I was there. Willie was maximizing for stability. I was hearing clear from the team that they'd gone through a lot of change and we needed to create some stability. So as we went into this year, we had some ambitious hiring goals. And I actually took time to rewrite our interview playbook. And so it was really intentional over how I thought about that. And so the first round we do a role play, but we use a client example, a prospective client example. And we do 3 rounds in that role play where we give them feedback in each of the rounds. And what we're looking for is to see, are they picking up on that feedback, and are they like picking up on the Easter eggs that we're planting in the rounds that we do, right? Because we want to see if do they pick up on it, do they build upon it, do they ask questions? Then in the next round, if they're successful past that role play round, we use that same client example and ask them to do a very short case study, but focused on the questions that they would ask the client. And then when they're in the panel round with the manager, we ask them to really kind of explain why they're asking those questions. And then we'll give them some answers to those questions and ask them, what follow-up questions would you ask based on the information that I've given you? And then in the third and final round, we're really asking them to, kind of walk us through a deal that they've won from first phone call to winning the client, right? And what we're really looking for is, are they able to articulate the pain points that they've been able to uncover through the discovery process and how they tailored their solution to those pain points? So I think by having those very intentional stages in the process, and when I come in and do my kind of last check, for an account executive role, I'm really asking them what stood out to them throughout the process. And one of the things is they say, hey, it really felt deliberate. It really felt like every stage built upon each other. But then also I'm able to kind of point back to them like, this is what we were measuring for. And this is why you've been successful to this point.
Yeah, I just came out an interview, so it made me think about it. But like, even you ask people like, why are you here? Why are you here for this company? And like seeing, I think often is like, well, how curious are they? I think a lot of people rock up for a job and actually don't actually know that much about the job that they're interviewing for. It's very common.
By this. Like, don't waste your own time if you don't know what this is.
It's easier than ever to find out about companies. Yeah. Easier and the market than ever before.
Absolutely.
I think I would really like a copy of your interview playbook, Lisa. I think this is a giveaway on LinkedIn, please. One thing I always wonder though, because curiosity is such an important trait, but how hard is it to retain these? Because if they're naturally curious, does that mean they get bored more quickly and so they're likely to leave and go elsewhere after a year?
Yeah, we have had a really impressive, retention rate, and in my current organization, and really all the companies I've been with. So, but I think what's most important is that that I continue to challenge them in either the roles that they're in, or really kind of fostering their curiosity and into kind of other areas of the business that they might be interested in. I think mobility, movement in a company is really important. But in the sales, within sales, like for me, I think I really try to understand, is this their chosen career? Like, is this something that they're really passionate about and get a lot of interest and excitement from? And then, from there, it's how can I encourage that curiosity within the context of the deals that they're working, the types of opportunities that they're, that they're partnering with the organization on. And that's why I love sales, because you can be curious for life, and kind of never be satisfied, right? And so I just really try to foster that with my team. Yeah.
Awesome. And you're so sales director now at FareHarbor. What's the next step for you, Lisa? Where do you envision your 20 years in sales? I know how that feels. And then you think, what's next? So what are you envisioning?
Yeah, it's kind of a daunting question. I think, considering my personal, we've talked a little bit about, I'm a relatively new mom, but I am really focused on FareHarbor's growth in EMEA. I think there represents so much opportunity for us in this market. But longer term, I do see myself in a global leadership role where I can shape strategies that combine innovation and sustainable growth. I think those two elements are the two that I'm most excited by, and and I think I can lend the most value in the organizations I've been with, and kind of any future roles I might take. So, yeah, I'm really excited about the future, but I'm also excited about the present. Now.
Do you think the future is in Amsterdam?
I do, actually. Yeah, I think my partner and I have spoken that because he spent 4 years in New York, a decade ago in his career. And then obviously I was in Singapore for the 4 years. We actually met when in Singapore. And we've kind of talked about it, like, are we up? Do we have another adventure in us? And we do. Like that's, so I would say we're not actively looking for that next adventure, but if it presents itself, we would go for it. Yeah.
Anywhere that you would immediately say yes to?
Oh, yeah, that is the question. I would go back to Singapore. I still have friends there, and in a new space, I think it could be really interesting. Dubai is kind of on the short list. I think the Middle East is incredibly, it's incredibly dynamic and interesting, and just kind of, it's probably the one. I mean, it is the kind of one major region. There are other regions, of course, but I have not really, worked directly in the Middle East. South Africa has also been on the table. But yeah, I think those are my top locations.
So off the back of that, for sales leaders looking to follow in your global footsteps, what advice would you offer about transitioning into leadership in new geographies?
I think in terms of leadership in general, it's important for me. It's been really important to recognize that leadership is really about serving others. It's about creating an environment where people thrive, and I think that cuts across regions and cultures. And how you put that into action might vary slightly, but the kind of higher level context of that, I think, remains the same. Kind of in the same vein, be open to learning, be open to listening, and be open to adapting your approach. I kind of spoke about that a little bit earlier, that, you might have a playbook that you think you can cut and paste into any market. You have to be open to the nuances and the variances that you might experience in any region.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, we're going to finish as we always do with some quick fire questions. So, first one up is, in your career, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned?
For me, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that if you prepare, you have an edge. Preparation is key. It's we kind of spoke about this in terms of the, the jobs hunt and, the number of people that turn up to interviews that kind of haven't done their research. It's really unbelievable how many people don't prepare. And so, for me, just preparation is key. And I can often kind of be ahead of the game just by preparing. Yeah.
Too busy watching Netflix.
On TikTok.
Yeah. Or TikTok. Yeah, good point.
What's one belief or perspective you've changed your mind about?
I hope, this might be a little bit controversial, and it's something I've learned a little bit later in my career, but it's really that it's okay to be selfishly productive. I went through a lot of my career thinking the more projects I take on, the more people I help out, the more things that I do, kind of the more, kind of good points I will earn, right? But I've really come to appreciate that, by being selfishly productive, I'm able to drive my objectives forward. And so, I'll often take, different things that might be in front of me and say, is this activity going to drive my objectives forward? And if it isn't, then I really need to question if it will be time well spent. Yeah.
It's a bit of a stupid question to ask what your favourite book or podcast is, because there's about 1 million behind you. But anyway,
you can only pick one.
Let's presume that you do read books, unlike me. Yeah. What is a book or podcast that you'd recommend, Lisa?
Oh, okay. So I have a podcast and a book. So Okay,
Two.
Cool. So I am a little bit of a U.S. political junkie. That is kind of where it's where I spend a little bit too much of my free time. But I love the podcast, The Powers That Be. It's 30 minutes, short hits, but it covers from media to fashion to politics, and it covers a lot of different topics. So I really like that one. And then in terms of books, I'm actually going to choose a sales book, and it's one that I've really, my VP now actually turned me on to, but it's Sales Management Simplified. And it's, in that book, he speaks about the power of accountability meetings. And that is something that we have put into practice here. And I think it's really going to be a game changer for us. Yeah.
How do you switch off after a busy day? Again, probably a stupid question because it's probably with your little one.
No, yeah, it is. And I was going to say, like, it might be a little bit cliche, but it is true for me. But, being completely present with my daughter is how I switch off. I mentioned earlier, but I don't even take my phone out until after she's gone to bed. And for me, that has really helped me switch off at the end of the day.
Cool. And last question, what female leader in your network or anyone you know should we have a chat with next?
I referred to her a little bit earlier with what would Susan do, but her name is Susan Deal. She was my regional sales director and has gone on to do other amazing things. But yeah, she's a very inspirational leader, and I think she'd be great. I haven't actually looked at her LinkedIn in a little while.
I want to chat to her just so I can do what would Susan do in this scenario and steal yours?
Yeah,
love that.
Absolutely.
Awesome, Lisa. Great. Well, look, thanks so much for the chat. It's been awesome. And we'll speak to you soon. Thanks.
See you in London soon. I'm going to drag you here on that Eurostar.
That sounds great. I would be very happy to participate. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Scale Sessions. If you found today's insights valuable, be sure to subscribe and leave a review.
Stay connected for more no-nonsense advice to help you scale your business, drive revenue, and achieve your growth goals.